Good morning. This is Terry Allen, Radical Progressive, and it is December 2nd, 2020. There's a few things we need to talk about, and I am going to go through a little quick history of the corruption and the decisions that were made to protect the guilty. And when I mean guilty, I mean the war criminals and the bankers. So I think we should start with Glass-Steagall, the canceling of Glass-Steagall, which was done under Bill Clinton. Glass-Steagall was put into effect under Franklin Roosevelt as one of the first banking regulations that were done after the Great Depression. And what it was designed to do specifically was to separate the two banking systems. You have, on one side, you had the banks that dealt with businesses and home loans and industry, part of the physical economy, the production side of capitalism. And then on the other side, you had the financial houses, which are the gambling casinos on Wall Street, the gambling banks, basically speculators, the fraudsters, the ones that basically, if you look at what happened in the Great Depression with the stock market, is that the banks were rigging the game. They were doing what was called pump and dump, which is they would start buying up stock, get the prices up, and then boom, sell off and let the suckers take the losses. There were virtually no regulations for the banks back then, and they just wreaked havoc. So that Glass-Steagall prevented the financial houses from taking and merging with the commercial banks to use those hard assets to gamble with. And it worked very well. We had, after World War II, we had the Bretton Woods system, which was designed to rebuild the economies of the world after the destruction of the war. And well, we can also go to 1971 under Nixon, when he took the dollar off the gold standard. Under the Bretton Woods system, what they had done was they had set the interest rates, and they had pegged the dollar to gold, and it was not allowed to float. Every year they would change the value. But what that allowed businesses and industry to do was to plan ahead, plan long term. So what they did was they took the dollar off the gold standard and it started to float. So that means that every day there was a different interest rate. Every day the currency would be either devalued or pumped up. And that's great for speculators. They love that kind of thing. But it doesn't do anything for the economy. All it does, it's like a gambling casino. All it does is make bankers wealthy and screws everyone else. So once that was off, that was pushed by the bankers, the deregulation. And of course, Clinton passed it because he was horrible when it comes to economic policy. Absolutely awful. With NAFTA, which just wrecked the economy, wrecked Mexico, and it just wrecked our economy. It sent hundreds of thousands of good paying industrial jobs to Mexico. We were lied to, essentially. And some of us knew that it was a fraud. Some of us knew that it was a scam. But convinced the congressmen and the senators. They all went along with it. They all thought it was going to be a wonderful thing. And look what happened. Then you had a huge amount of people getting laid off on welfare and food stamps. And so then what did Clinton do? cut welfare and food stamps. Then you had the crime bill. It's just unbelievable what Clinton did. But people praise him and think he was a wonderful Democratic president because they just don't know what he did. About the only thing we can remember is the stain on the blue dress. There was a story about Monica Lewinsky. I don't know if this is true or not, but after this whole thing happened with her and Bill Clinton, and oh my God, the media frenzy and then the impeachment, she basically said that she couldn't be a Democrat anymore. She was switching to be a Republican because the Democrats left a bad taste in her mouth. So that kind of exemplifies the situation. Bill Clinton was horrible. Then you ended up with George Bush. And remember the hanging chads in Florida and the recounts, and Al Gore might have won, but the Supreme Court stopped the count and just handed the election over to George W. Bush. When you look at this guy and you listen to this guy, George W. Bush, how people could get behind this guy and vote for him is just mind-boggling. The guy is a moron. He looks like he's the product of incest. I mean, it looks like the guy Alfred E. Newman on Mad Magazine. He was awful, and people rallied around this guy and voted for him. The Bush crime family dynasty. It's just mind-boggling. I just don't understand it, because this information is easy to get if people weren't so lazy. The problem is, and I've said this before, the media has an agenda, and they want things to be a certain way. They like the status quo. They like the deregulated banking system. They like being able to take factories and close them here, lay off American workers, and move the factories and different industries to cheap labor pools like India and China and Bangladesh and Vietnam and you name it. They like Joe Biden, and that's probably the one thing that should alert everyone. That's a giant red flag, is that you have the military-industrial complex, which is Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and General Electric, and you name these huge corporations that make billions and billions of dollars on these military contracts to build bombs and fighter jets and all the military death hardware, destruction hardware. They make billions and billions of dollars, and they have plants all over the country building this. And so you've got different congressmen and senators that want to protect these jobs in their state, and they're also given contributions from these giant corporations to keep the wheels oiled, keep the gears rolling for the military-industrial complex. Why do they like Biden? Think about it. Why do they not like Trump and they like Biden and they back Biden? Think about it. Because Trump was against NATO. He wanted to shut it down because we don't need NATO. The Soviet Union is gone. Europe is not worried about Russia. They're not worried about a Russian invasion. We have got army bases and military bases all over the world. Over 1,000 bases around the world. Most outside our borders. How many military bases does Russia have outside their borders? One. What's Russia's military budget per year? $65 billion. What's our military budget every year? $800 billion a year. And that's just what's on the books. I guarantee you it's probably double that, because you've got money going under the table to the CIA, military intelligence, and that's where you get 9/11, and that's where you get the Patriot Act, and that's where you get endless war. Endless war. We have been in Afghanistan for almost 20 years, and we can't get out because, oh my God, if we do, look what's going to happen. All the terrorists are going to come running back in. It's a scam. It's a lie. The United States and the British created Al-Qaeda by financing the Mujahideen, which was tied to the Bin Laden family from Saudi Arabia. So that's where you get this circle of evil. One hand washes the other. It goes around and around. We have to fight terrorism. The amount of money that we spend on terrorism, fighting terrorism, is trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars a year we spend. It's insane. And if you look at statistics, the chances of being killed in a terrorist attack are less than being hit by lightning. We've got 1,000 other things that are more deadly. Cancer, different illnesses, car wrecks, people drowning in swimming pools. I mean, you name it. There are many risks in this world, and terrorism is not one of them. But we use it as an excuse to keep the military-industrial complex rolling and keeping the huge contracts rolling in. That's what it's all about. All you got to do is just think about it and look at some of the evidence, and you will see that that is the game that's being played. Trump wants to get us out of some of these wars because he realizes it's criminal. He even said something about the hypocrisy of the United States foreign policy when our hypocritical Democratic Party and the Republican Party go on and on about, oh my God, Russia interference in our elections, or this and that interference. The United States has been interfering in elections for decades and decades. We are the number one violator of international law. We have a propaganda system in this country called the corporate media, which promotes an ideology of war and destruction. You've got the media that love Biden. Why? Why does the media love Biden? Why does the media, most of the media, hate Trump? Think about it. Because Biden is for the status quo, for deregulating banks, for keeping the wars going. He is very predictable. People know his track record. He has been for banks and huge corporations and the 1% all his professional life. That's what he's been for. And against the working class. He is a womanizer. He is a molester of children. And you can see videos on YouTube of him fondling kids and trying to kiss them and smelling their hair, and women complaining about it. And I don't know why Trump didn't say Creepy Joe instead of Sleepy Joe, because his name in Washington is Creepy Joe. That's what people know him by, and he is. There was some stories, and there was a book written by somebody from the Secret Service that talked about the disgusting things that Biden did to women, particularly women in the Secret Service. And then you have Tara Reade's allegation, which no one will touch. It's mind-boggling. The Me Too movement just folded when it came to an accusation about Biden. It's absolutely criminal. It is criminal. Wasn't it Amy Warbach that also talked about the stuff with the Jeff Epstein case? How she knew about this stuff for years and couldn't get the media to talk about it. And that the British royal family, when they were bringing up Prince Andrew's involvement of the British royal family, she said that they had a million ways to threaten the network to not publish the dossier on Prince Andrew and his having sex with minors. So you can see it's a criminal network. They protect each other, and that's where the deep state comes in. The deep state loves Biden. They loved Hillary Clinton. You saw what was going on with Peter Strzok and his girlfriend, Lisa Page. You can see the criminality that goes in at the upper levels of the FBI and the CIA and what they do. With Glass-Steagall canceled, the banks did exactly what they knew they were going to do. It was a criminal operation from the beginning. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They were defrauding the American people and their taxpayers. They were giving loans to people that were not qualified to get loans. And I even was going to refinance my home in 2007. And I remember that the broker tried to push on me one of these 5-year interest-only loans. It's called a 5-year ARM, where you only pay the interest and not the principal to get your payment way down so you could qualify. And so I asked the broker, what do we do in 5 years when this comes due? I said, what happens if the government has raised interest rates way out of the roof and all of a sudden my mortgage payment is double or triple? And he said to me, this is a quote, just refinance again. So that's how they were suckering people into getting home loans. Everybody wants a home. Everybody wants to have their own home. It's natural. So if a bank comes along and tells you, oh look, this is a way we can get your payments really low so that you qualify, some of these people, that's the only way they could get a home. What was really disgusting was how the banks were saying, well, people were getting loans that shouldn't have been getting them. Well, who was giving them? Who was qualifying them? It was the banks. So the banks were getting as many loans as they could get to bundle into these AAA securities. They knew that these loans were not going to perform in 5 years. They knew it. But they didn't care, because they also knew one thing, was that they were too big to fail. They got bailed out. And they knew they were going to get bailed out. This was a colossal criminal operation by the banks to loot the American population and the economy. And that's what they did. And they wrecked the economy. They wrecked my business. They wrecked a lot of businesses. Business after business failed. Huge amount of unemployment. it was disgusting. And how many bankers went to jail that committed fraud? How many? None. What did Eric Holder, the Attorney General, say? Well, we couldn't go after the bankers because they pull the plug on the world economy and crash the economy, and so we have to let them all go scot-free. But they did foreclose on 5.1 million homes in this country. And what did the banks do? They took the homes back and resold them again. What the crime of the century. Unbelievable. And these people got away with this. They got away with it. It was a criminal operation and they got away with it. And who had to pay for it? American taxpayers. They bailed out the banks. Remember the very first TARP was $800 billion? And people say, oh, well, the banks paid the money back. How did they do that? How did the banks pay the money back? Because they got new loans and new grants from the government. They ended up spending, the Fed ended up spending trillions of dollars when it was all over to the banks. How many people got bailouts? None. Only the banks got the bailouts and huge corporations. Once again, the 1% profited, made billions of dollars off of this criminal operation. It's like the mafia running the government, basically. And you say that Trump's bringing in fascism? Really? Fascism has been here for a long time already. When you have corporations that own the government and run the government, that's called fascism. And now look what the Democrats, the DNC, and I don't call them liberals. These people are corporate elitist scumbags, criminals, war criminals. That's what these people are. When you've got the government that's owned by the corporations, that's called fascism. And look what they're getting ready to do now. The First Amendment is being taken away from us. Here's the next one. You had Edward Snowden and Julian Assange at WikiLeaks publishing documents showing criminal operations and war crimes and torture. And with Snowden, you had the NSA monitoring everything, storing all metadata, all phone numbers, all texts, taking everything and saving everything and making a huge database that they could use to go after their political enemies. They could check on their husbands and wives. Americans are such hypocrites. It's hard to describe. So who's in jail and who's being indicted? Not the war criminals, not the torturers. Obama pardoned the torturers. We even have somebody, one of the women I think that's runs the Defense Department. I forget her name, but she was one of the main military personnel that okayed the torture that was going on in Iraq and around the world, actually. So, who do we go after? Assange and Snowden and Chelsea Manning. Who gets put in jail? Assange, Chelsea Manning. Snowden might as well be in jail. He's stuck in Russia. He didn't want to go to Russia. He wanted to go somewhere else, but he ended up, that was another scam operation that was done by the CIA. They pulled his passport when he ended up at the Russian airport trying to pass through once they pulled his passport, he was not able to go anywhere else. He was stuck. And then they tried to make it look like, oh, see, he's a Russian agent. Look at that. Hillary's emails were not hacked. It was a leak. It was done by Seth Rich. The evidence shows this. Seth Rich was the DNC's IT guy, and he had access to everything. He downloaded all this information onto flash drives because Bill Binney, a retired NSA officer that wrote a lot of the NSA software, they analyzed the upload from WikiLeaks and determined that with the timestamps on the metadata that these emails and this data had been downloaded onto a flash drive, because the flash drive speeds are much higher than internet speeds. You can't hack into a system and pull off data that fast. It's not possible. Particularly in places like Russia and China, where they've got throttles on the internet speeds and their infrastructure isn't that great. What happened to Seth Rich? 2 weeks later, he was found dead at 4 a.m. on a sidewalk in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., shot in the back. It was not robbery because he still had a very expensive watch and a wallet with money in it. Even Assange wouldn't admit it, but he actually made some statements about how dangerous it is for some of the whistleblowers to give him information, and referenced Seth Rich, and even posted a reward to find out who killed him. Why would Julian Assange and WikiLeaks do that? Who had Seth Rich killed? It's done by the deep state. They wanted to teach whistleblowers a lesson, and that's what they did. So whistleblowers get put in jail, and the perpetrators of the crimes, the war crimes and the torture and the illegal surveillance, they all go scot-free and write books and travel around the world in their Learjets and live a wonderful life in Martha's Vineyard. So this is a two-level cultural system in this country, and you have the 1%, the super rich, on top, and everybody else is getting screwed on the bottom. So let's review here real quick. You have the military-industrial complex, you have the deep state, you have the media, and you have Wall Street bankers. All love Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Why? Why do they hate Trump, and why do they like Biden? Purely financial. They don't give a damn about the crazy tweets in the middle of the night. Joe Biden taking back the soul of America. It's all gaslighting and platitudes. They are interested in one thing, and is power and money. Well, two things: power and money, which basically are tied together, because you have to have power to get money, etc. And you have to have money to have power. So that's the scam. That's the criminal operation that's going on. And so when you have voter machines that were put into some of these swing states with a company called Dominion and with software company called Smartmatic, their software is well known to be designed specifically to manipulate vote totals. You've got Sidney Powell, the attorney that's investigating this. That's where the big vote fraud is. There's a lot of vote fraud that went on. There's ballot stuffing, there's a all kinds of stuff. The Republicans did it too. In Georgia, they threw off almost 200,000 black voters off the registration rolls, so they couldn't vote. With Jim Crow type of excuses like, well, they had moved, or, you know, their names were duplicated, etc., etc. So both sides do it, except this time the Democratic Party did it in a big, arrogant way. Look what they did to Bernie Sanders. They destroyed the progressives. They got Elizabeth Warren to come in on it, and she basically helped screw Bernie Sanders by staying in the race longer. That was the scam. They wanted to do anything they could to get rid of Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, the two best candidates that we had. And then they handpicked Joe Biden, shove him down our throats just like they did Hillary Clinton. And there you go. Now we're in this mess. Try to remember, the election was not, in 2000, the election was not certified until December 13th. So all this clamoring, and there's no evidence here and there's no evidence there by the media, it's all lies. There is tons of evidence. I don't know if they're going to overturn the election or not, probably not. But the deep state and the CIA need to be opened up, and we need to be able to see with our own eyes the criminality and the vote fraud and the operation that's going along to get rid of Trump. I don't like Trump. Trump has done some terrible things. What he did in Syria, what he's doing with the economy, propping up the stock market, giving the huge $1 trillion tax break to the rich. And what did the rich do with the tax break? What did they do with it? They didn't put it back in the economy. What do they do with it? They bought back their own stock to increase the stock values, because the CEOs and the board of directors make all their money with the stock values. The Fed this year alone have pumped over $4 trillion into the stock market. And what have they done for the American people? Almost nothing. We got the CARES Act, which was a little bit of relief, but most of that money went to the stock market and the 1%. The 1,000 richest people in this country got 90% of the bailout money again. It's criminal. The criminals have taken over this country. The oligarchy and the 1% have taken over this country, and Joe Biden is their boy, and they want him in. And when he, in 6 months or a year, ends up out in the front lawn of the White House, and I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again, when Biden is sitting on a park bench out there in his bathrobe feeding pigeons, while Kamala Harris is in there making all the decisions on who to bomb next, okay, then you can ask your questions, was Trump really as bad as Biden, or worse? In my estimation, no, at this point. I don't care about his stupid tweets. We know he's a little crazy. He's a terrible businessman, but he did a few good things, and one of them was the tariffs. We needed the tariffs to get industry back to this country, to bring back good jobs. We needed to redo NAFTA, which they did, which didn't really do much. We needed to get out of the Paris Climate Accord, because the United States is only producing about 15% of the world's CO2 emissions. So the United States will end up taking it in the shorts, and you cannot run industrial economies and industrial society on wind and solar. It cannot be done with the technological levels that we have today and the energy flux density that you get from wind and solar. Watch the movie that Michael Moore produced called the Planet of the Humans, and you will see he is correct. The cost of the windmills and the solar panels and what the energy has to be used to produce them. The scam of the electric car. Electric cars are great, but if you think you're going to improve the economy by buying one, you can forget that, because you're not. They call them coal cars because most of the electricity in this country is produced by coal still and oil, and you get a huge amount of losses on the grid. About 50% of your electricity is lost on the grid with the friction and the heat from the wires, etc. So we have a horrible criminal operation going on. We have fascism in this country. The progressives are getting pulled down. The big, large tech firms are determining what you can watch and what you can't watch, the information that you can get. They even have this little disclaimer on YouTube that AP has already determined that Joe Biden won the election. Who give AP the power to determine who wins an election? How is that? How can that be an expert source? The media is so incredibly corrupt. Oh my God. When I read this list to you, you're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked. In 1992, there were 50 companies in this country that owned most of the media. In 1996, there were 25 companies. Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act. He signed that. And what did that do? That was supposed to deregulate the telecommunication industry. What did it do? It allowed for mergers. And all of these corporations started merging and taking over all of the radio stations and the TV channels and the newspapers, internet access. And now you have 5 companies that control 90% of the media in this country. That's the oligarchy. They run the media. They create what's called manufactured consent in the population by giving us, spoon-feeding us, the American population, lies and BS to influence policy and to influence elections. That's what they do. They manipulate the population to vote for certain candidates that they want. Essentially vote fraud. So you can see the pattern in this country of what's going on. You can see the situation. We are in for a mess. Well, we're already in a mess, and it's only getting worse. And the Green New Deal is not going to work. I said before, the only way I will back the Green New Deal is if they bring in nuclear power, because that's the only thing that we can do as a stepping stone to fusion energy, which is the ultimate power source, which is ultimately what this country needs to go to in China and India. The Green New Deal will not work. It will wreck the economy, wreck the world economy, kill millions of people when you pull back in the energy sources for farming and industry. It's a scam. It's another giant scam. So lastly, I want to bring up the third party movement in this country. The People's Party movement. That's peoplesparty.org. Join us. Sign up. Volunteer. It's called the People's Party for a reason. Because we need to take back our country from the oligarchy and the one-party system in this country, which is the Republican and Democratic Party. There is very little difference with the economic policies of the Democrat and the Republican parties. They all are for more war. They are all for huge military budgets. They are all for cutting social programs for the poor and middle class. They are for the 1%. They are for huge wealth transfers, the reverse Robin Hood effect. Steal from the poor and the middle class and give to the rich. And that's what's happening. And you can see it clearly if you would just open your eyes and get your media, get your information from some other sources besides MSNBC and CNN and Fox. Because the information is there. The knowledge is there. The tools and weapons that we need are there to find. You just need to dig, watch, read, listen. I'm going to make another quick list. Jake from Blackstone Intelligence. Crystal and Sagar on The Rising by The Hill. Jimmy Dore is probably one of the best independent news channels on the internet. Joe Rogan, Kyle Kulinski, Katie Helper, and Matt Taibbi. You've got Chris Hedges and Richard Wolff and RT, and there's show after show. Sean Atwood. Sean Atwood has a great internet show on all of the corruption that goes on in the British Empire and with Jeff Epstein. There's lots of good media sources out there. Abby Martin, The Gray Zone with Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal. You've got great reporters out there. Seymour Hersh. The information is there. The knowledge is there. Open your mind, open your eyes, and reason this out for yourself. We need a third party because the Democratic and Republican parties cannot be reformed. They're too corrupt. They have a the 1% has a stranglehold on the power at the top of the DNC and the RNC. We need a coalition of the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and the People's Party. We can take this country back. We are going to be running candidates, progressive candidates, in 2 years for Congress and the Senate. We are going to have a presidential campaign. We are going to have a presidential candidate. We have a lot of people moving to the People's Party movement. Marianne Williamson, Jesse Ventura, Chris Hedges, Jimmy Dore. There is a lot of great talent out there. Nina Turner was a spokeswoman for Bernie Sanders. We need the progressives to get on board. We need everybody to get on board. Donate if you can. If you can't, volunteer on the weekends. We need to get signatures to get people on ballots. This is a major push to take this country back for the 99%. The oligarchy and the media are going to do everything they can to stop us. The CIA is going to try and infiltrate us. They're going to try and destroy this movement. You'll be able to see it in real time on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. You will see it happen before your eyes. The attacks and the lies, the gaslighting, the platitudes. You will see it. And you will know who our enemies are. So I'm going to sign off. I have to edit this tonight. This is a brief history of the corruption in this country. So this is Terry Allen Radical Progressive signing off for December 2nd, 2020. We've got a long road ahead of us, but get online and sign up for peoplesparty.org and do it now. All right, have a good day. Thank you.